Namaste. So, yesterday we completed all 55 sutras of the second chapter. So, today let's just do a quick recap just to refresh all the topics covered in the second chapter. So, Maharshi Patanjali starts off by describing Kriya Yoga. He says there are three components to Kriya Yoga: Tapah, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana. And he emphasizes on the necessity to practice Kriya Yoga so that we can establish ourselves in the states of Samadhi discussed in the previous chapter, and also to overcome the kleshas, the causes of misery. And then he goes on to describe the 5 kleshas: avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. And there is one sutra for avidya. There are 2 sutras, one sutra for each, where he describes them in a little more detail. And then he talks about the consequences of the kleshas and its interaction with the impressions that it forms in the mind, the actions. And this section, I feel it reminds us that we are responsible for our own state of mind, whatever it may be. And he's pointing out how we can deal with it. He's pointing out the factors that lead to whatever actions that we do and its consequences, a state of mind that we end up with. In the 14th sutra, he says, Tehlada paritapa phala punya punya hetutvat. So here, punya and apunya can be seen as the extent to which the kleshas are influencing our thoughts, our actions. And based on whether it is punya or apunya, it can lead to pleasure or pain. It can lead to a pleasant state or an unpleasant state of mind. After this, the 15th sutra, very, very important, one of my favorite sutras, Parinamatapa samskar dukkhair guna vritti virodhancha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinah. So the sign of an intelligent, discriminating, wise person, viveka, is he sees everything in the material world as a cause of sorrow. And this is not really a fatalistic or a pessimistic statement. He says this to point out that our joy is not dependent on the external world, because right in the next sutra he says, Heyam dukkham anagatam. So kind of the purpose of yoga, purpose of practicing, is to get rid of the sorrow that is yet to come, that has not yet come. So we prevent that. So one may see dukkhameva sarvam vivekinah as a very pessimistic statement, but this makes it clear that it is not. We are getting rid of the sorrow that has not yet come. After this, over the next few sutras, he helps us again understand the functioning of this world that we are in, the material world that we live in, that we exist in. And he talks a lot about the engagement, the interaction, the interplay between the seer within and this material world outside, the drashta and the drishya. He spends few sutras talking about this play. And he mentions the purpose of the drishya. He gives 2 purposes. There is bhoga and apavarga. So the purpose of this scenery, this world, this that we live in, is for experience. Bhoga is one of the purposes. So he's not saying that we should not experience the world, but he's reminding us that there is also this purpose of apavarga that helps us liberate ourselves. And we remind ourselves that this is also a purpose of the world we live in. And he goes on to say in the 24th sutra, he says, Tasya hetura vidya, this interaction between the seer and this scenery, this engagement, this attachment, everything that happens, the cause of that is avidya, ignorance. And we need to overcome that. So when we are stuck in this avidya, then we engage with the world in a manner that is conducive to help us overcome it. Then he says, he points out the faculty of viveka, again the intelligence. Viveka khyatira viplava hanopayah. So this clear and distinct intelligence that allows us to differentiate between the self, the eternal unchanging self, and this transient everything else in the world, including our own mind. That is the way to overcome this avidya. And this can lead to kaivalyam, the ultimate liberated state. And then he slowly goes into the practical part of yoga, the second half of the chapter. He he says through this practice, of course, we can also become aware of higher states of consciousness. And all of us who practice yoga meditation regularly, we get glimpses of what he means here. Then he introduces the 8 limbs of yoga. He says, Yoga Anushthana, Yoga Anushtanad Ashuddhik Shaye Jnana Deeptir Aviveka Khyate Hai. So through the practice, through steadying ourselves, establishing ourselves in the practice of the limbs of yoga, we can get rid of whatever impurities in the mind, in the consciousness that come up. And it illuminates this faculty of knowledge up to the point of attaining the state of viveka that was spoken of. And then he, of course, names the 8 limbs of yoga: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Then he describes the yamas, he describes the 5 yamas. And he reminds us that these are mahavratam, these are the supreme vows that we take. It is independent of our position, the place, the time. We have to uphold, we have to live them, we have to practice them. We cannot give excuses. And then he describes the niyamas, the 5 niyamas. After doing this, he gives us a technique that helps us practice the yamas and the niyamas better and better. Pratipaksha bhavanam. So cultivating this wave of contrary thoughts whenever our mind goes on a path that is opposed or that is against the principles of the yamas and niyamas. So we stop ourselves from deviating from practice of the yamas and the niyamas and come back to the path. Pratipaksha bhavanam. There are 2 sutras where he talks about this phenomenon, this principle. Then after this, he gives us the benefits of practicing each of the yamas and each of the niyamas. Each of the yamas: ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. And then he talks about the benefits of practicing the 5 niyamas: shaucha, santosha, tapaha, swadhyaya, ishvara pranidhana. And then he goes on to talk about asana, the next limb. There are 3 sutras to do with asanas. He gives us the principle of asana and also the benefit of asana. 5 sutras after that to do with pranayama. 3 sutras where he talks about the mechanics or the mechanism of practicing pranayama, and 2 sutras where he gives us the benefits of pranayama. And the last 2 sutras he talks about pratyahara. So 1 sutra where he explains the phenomenon, the concept of pratyahara, and then he also gives us the benefit of pratyahara. Pratyahara is usually considered to be the bridge between what we call antaranga yoga and bahiranga yoga, the external limbs, the first 4 limbs that we saw: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara together are considered bahiranga yoga, but pratyahara links this to the internal practice, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, which comes in the next chapter. So this is the summary of the 2nd chapter. So let's keep this in mind. Let's remind ourselves of all the principles that we have studied. And let's begin our Abhyasa for today.